everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. Well, I hope everybody is having a good start to the new year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
And we are back today with the 5th edition of Tales from the Archives, and we can't wait to share these stories with you, so let's dive on in. All right, so our first story takes place in Colorado, of course. It's really hard for me to get away from Colorado, but I promise not all the stories in here are from Colorado. In July of 1911, a killing shook the small southern Colorado community near Aguilar, Colorado. And Aguilar is pretty southeast in the state.
Yeah.
It's really tiny. Ignacio DeSadio, a 30-year-old Italian rancher and recent transplant to the area, was found dead on a county road just outside of town while returning home to his ranch. And witnesses reported hearing gunshots shortly before his body was discovered, and his body was lying face down in the roadway. And so when police officers got there, they quickly determined that DeSadio had been shot multiple times at close range with a shotgun, and the violence of the attack was pretty bad. He had powder burns on his body, which again showed that the shots were fired just a few feet away, and there were empty shotgun shells scattered near the scene.
Huh. Sound like, well, obviously it was intentional.
Exactly. Yeah, it does, yeah. But I see what you're saying. Like, it's not a hunting accident.
Right.
Or, something like that. So DeSadio, he was a native of southern Italy and had only recently made the transition from running a grocery store in Aguilar to ranching in the nearby valley. And according to reports, he had no enemies, and early articles even noted that the motive for the murder was unclear. So a posse, and that was what was in the newspapers, a posse, was quickly formed.
Yeah.
I love that language. And sheriff's deputies scoured the surrounding countryside, but at first they couldn't find the killer. But within days, attention turned to Dominic Piscone, and this was DeSadio's former business partner. So the two men had, I couldn't really verify this, but I think they had the grocery store together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then it dissolved, and they ended
Well, it makes sense because he had that business.
And then he just recently switched to running a
Right.
ranch. But I guess witnesses came forward and said that the two were frequently arguing over business matters and their outstanding accounts and probably splitting up.
Money.
Exactly. It all comes down to money. And witnesses testified that Piscone had been seen near DeSadio's home on the night of the murder and was observed acting really highly agitated. And a teenage boy later told officials that he saw a man carrying a shotgun run into the rear of Piscone's house shortly after the shots were fired. But further complicating the case were Piscone's own statements. Newspapers reported that he gave conflicting accounts of his whereabouts that evening. So investigators also revisited the fact that these two had been arguing over money the last few months since their partnership had dissolved. And following a coroner's inquest, Piscone, he was arrested and jailed, and he was charged in connection with the murder. Headlines across Colorado and neighboring states, they were pretty blunt about this whole situation, emphasizing both the violence of the crime and the Italian identities of those involved. So stereotyping them basically.
Right.
But beyond the dramatic language, the story, it reveals something quieter and more tragic. The violent end of a young immigrant's life sadly leads to just unanswered questions because I couldn't find anything on this after that.
Really?
Yep, after he was arrested, I couldn't find him in any papers ever again. So I don't know if he ended up spending his time in jail. I couldn't find him on Ancestry, so I'm not sure what happened there, but it's lost to history.
Wow.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah, that's a murder.
I know, you think it would show up. I mean, I guess the only thing I'm wondering is it was such a small town that
that's
newspapers and stuff might have not
followed up on it.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they probably didn't even have their own newspaper.
Probably
Probably
not.
had to go to like
Pueblo or
Trinidad.
And then the Rocky Mountain News and stuff would pick up on it, but they might have not followed up on it.
Right.
So. All right. So this next one, I really wanted to turn this into a full story. This actually involves a president of the United States and his son and an Italian American. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But before we get into this story, I have to give a disclaimer on this Italian's name. It is reported in the newspapers as Michael Thistlewalla. And it is spelled like thistle, Thistlewalla. That is obviously not spelled correctly because I searched and searched for who Michael truly was, and I would type in, variations of the last name Thistlewalla. Oh my gosh, I tried different spellings and ancestry, and I don't know what Michael's true last name is, but I'm pretty sure it's not Thistlewalla.
Yeah.
So the police officers, the police reports, the hospital, the doctors, however they reported his name or heard his name, and it's the only way it's reported in the newspapers. So that when I say Thistlewalla.
Okay, well, what is it again? Thistlewalla.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he said Thistlewalla. Add a vowel to the end and we'll call it good. So, all right, but I just wanted to give that disclaimer at the beginning of this little tell.
That is quite a name.
It's quite the name. And you would look at that and I think Scottish, like thistles, but it is reported in the newspaper, an Italian labor immigrant, Michael Thistlewalla. So, all right, so let's get into this story. In June 1910, a routine summer afternoon in Beverly, Massachusetts, suddenly became a national news story, one that would follow newspaper readers across the country for days. Michael Thistlewalla, an Italian immigrant laborer, was struck by an automobile driven by Robert A. Taft, the eldest son of President William Howard Taft.
Uh-oh.
See why I wanted to turn this into a full story?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is going to be so juicy. But reporters stated that Thistlewalla was a part of, I know every time I say that, Mom and I would shake our head. Reporters stated that Thistlewalla was you know what, I'm just going to call him Michael. Actually.
There you go.
So let's do that. He was a part of a group of laborers working near Pride's Crossing when Taft's car approached them. Though the vehicle slowed down and Robert Taft honked his horn as a warning, Michael reportedly seemed confused and stepped into the roadway at the wrong moment and was struck by the car's mudguard. And it knocked him violently to the ground. And so from what I could gather from the newspaper articles, there was a lot of construction going on in the area. I think it was road construction, which was why Taft was going so slow. But I mean, I've been in those kind of situations before where you're trying to cross the street and you have construction and there's cars and you're like, right. Oh my gosh, I don't know. Should I go? I'm going to go. And so that's kind of what I'm picturing happened. And witnesses even came forward and said that it was definitely not Robert's fault. Like he didn't do it on purpose. He was paying attention. He tried to warn him. So
yeah, he honked.
And Michael was rendered unconscious and rushed to Beverly Hospital, where doctors confirmed he had suffered a fractured skull. So from the start, his condition was described as grave. News of the accident reached Washington quickly, and President Taft was said to be deeply distressed over the matter. He immediately intervened, sending urgent telegrams and arranging for the best possible medical care. At the president's request, a prominent Boston surgeon was dispatched to assist in Michael's treatment, and local police were instructed to ensure that nothing was spared in caring for the injured man. Newspapers printed portions of the president's private telegrams, emphasizing both his concern and his insistence that, again, every effort be made to save his life.
Well, that's good, yeah.
Also, he ended up canceling their vacation plans. They were going to watch the Harvard-Yale yacht race.
Oh, well.
And they decided maybe we shouldn't go do that. And they actually went to to Beverly, Massachusetts to see Michael. But as doctors monitored his condition, daily updates appeared nationwide. Some reports suggested slight improvements, noting that Michael had passed a comfortable night in the hospital, while others stressed that his name remained on the hospital's dangerous list and that his chances of recovery were uncertain. As you can imagine, the press coverage was extensive.
Oh, I'm sure.
It would be interesting. I'm sure they got photos of Robert and his family walking into the hospital, and it'd be interesting to see some of those. If I knew Michael's true last name, I might be able to figure that out. But while it was extensive, the press coverage, it was also imbalanced. The majority of the headlines that came out in the newspaper articles, they focused on Taft and his family and how the president was distressed and the son felt remorseful. But Michael, he was not really involved in the story at all. He was kind of a secondary figure and barely talked about in the newspapers other than the moment his life changed when he was hit by the car. And that was it. You know, it didn't mention his family. It didn't mention how long he had been in America, what his plans were. And it was pretty much just
focused on the president and what a great job they're doing to help this poor guy out.
Exactly. Yes. And it's true. Like, it was very generous of them to do that, but it's like, yeah, no, let's just not talk about Michael.
Yeah.
So, and I think because of that, I don't know what happened to Michael. I don't know if he recovered. I don't know if he passed away in the hospital.
It just ended. They didn't
just ended
cover it again.
I mean, they could have. Maybe they figured out what Michael's real last name was and started reporting it that way, and that's why I can't find it. I don't know. Hopefully he survived. So,
well, you could be onto something on that because, you know, it's the president's son. You would think there would have been following through that.
Maybe I need to go back and give this one more shot and look at it through researching the son, and maybe I could find some more articles. Hopefully I can find something that'd be kind of interesting. I really want to know what his last name was, though.
I know.
Okay, now when I say I really wanted to turn the last story into a full episode, this one I really wanted to turn into a full episode. But again, it came down to spelling. The people's names in this next story were spelled wrong and I can't find them. So, all right. So this story takes place in March of 1925 in Pueblo's Italian community. And the community found itself at the center of a story so dramatic, it quickly spread far beyond Colorado. Circo Spicello was a young Italian immigrant and he had married Christine Tadero in a civil ceremony just months earlier. Now, let's talk about Circo because his name is the one that the papers got wrong. I can't find anybody with that first and last name, even in ancestral records or previous or future newspaper articles. I think I did figure out who he is, but I can't verify it.
Oh.
All right. So him and Christine married in a civil ceremony, but the couple was preparing for an elaborate church wedding for the month of March. This church wedding, it meant a lot to them. It represented their culture, their religious importance, and had been carefully planned by family and friends. But just days before the ceremony, Circo disappeared. He vanished. Now, let's talk about him a little bit because he was considered to be quite the catch in the Pueblo Italian colony. Everybody was like, he's the man to marry. And he had two women who were pursuing him, and I think he was pursuing them as well. And that was Christine Tadero, who he ended up marrying, and Caroline Kochevar. Again, I'm not sure if her name is spelled correctly, but that's how it was reported in the papers. And obviously we know he chose Christine, and this didn't sit well with Caroline. It was reported that when she found out he married Christine, she started screaming and crying. But going back to the night that he disappeared, according to police reports and newspaper accounts, he was walking to his wife's home one evening when an automobile pulled alongside him. Witnesses claimed that the car contained Caroline Kochevar, his former sweetheart, and she was described repeatedly in the press as the belle of Pueblo's Italian colony. Oh. So that's why I'm like, I don't think that last name's right. That's not an Italian last name. But anyways, so she pulled up in a car along with several men. Circo was allegedly seized, bound, gagged, and driven away toward Denver.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it said, a lot of the headlines said, bridegroom kidnapped. So the kidnapping was reported by Christine, who told authorities that her husband never showed up to her house that night, and she believed he had been taken against his will on the eve of their long-awaited religious wedding. So this was...
Oh, it was on their wedding day.
It was the night before because I think he was taken on Saturday.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were meant to be married that Sunday in the church. So now what followed was a whirlwind of accusation, rumor, and public spectacle. Some accounts allege that Caroline had acted out of jealousy after he refused to leave his wife and marry her instead. Other reports went further, claiming there had been an earlier attempt to actually poison Circo, leaving him seriously ill just days before his disappearance. Police in both Pueblo and Denver were alerted, but the details remained murky and often contradictory. As the days passed, newspapers began framing the story less as a crime and more as a scandal, which that makes sense. I could see that.
It sounds like she definitely has something to do with it.
Yep. But headlines started questioning whether Circo had truly been kidnapped or whether he had willingly gone with Caroline. Authorities hesitated to issue warrants, and the district attorney ultimately refused to pursue charges without Circo's cooperation. So, I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but it's just the headlines and newspapers speculating. Oh, well, maybe he wanted one last fling before he got married in the church. So Christine, meanwhile, had made repeated appeals for her husband's return, saying she wanted no prosecution against the people who took him, but just for him to come home so that their church wedding could go forward. But pressure mounted as Sunday approached. Despite weeks of preparation, the church stood ready and guests gathered with hope that he would appear, but he never did. So the wedding was officially called off, and newspapers described the scene as one of heartbreak and embarrassment for Christine.
Sad.
I know. In the end, Chirco, he remained missing from the altar and public record. Like I said, I couldn't find him. Some papers speculated he had eloped. Others said that he just called off the wedding. Others suggested he was being held until after the wedding date passed, but I can't give any definitive answers on what was true because all these names are misspelled. And like I said, I think I know who he is. I think I figured out the real last name and his real first name, but I can't verify it, so I don't want to talk about it. But Christine, she did remarry later on, and there is a couple of Caroline Koshevars in the archive records that I could find. Again, I wish I could have turned some of those into full episodes.
Yeah, the Taft one and this one.
And this one would have been really good.
It's like, where is this Chirco?
Exactly. What happened to him? And one thing that I think that the newspapers did, Christine's father's name was very close in spelling to Chirco. I think that they were confusing her father's name with her husband's name, but they still couldn't get the spelling right. So it was just...
Yeah, because you'd think that they would have followed up with the Caroline and the men in that car.
Well, and that's the thing, too. There's nothing even out there about searching through Caroline's name about what happened with this incident. So bizarre.
Yeah.
But I guess that's why we have Tales from the Archives.
Yeah. Back then, you never really know.
You don't. And then you also got to think how much of this story is so blown out of proportion and elaborated in the
press
papers. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, we hope you enjoyed listening to these Tales from the Archives, and we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.